Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are opening a file that is, well, it's heavy. It's heavy with history, heavy with emotion, and just heavy with the kind of contradictions that make you stare at the ceiling at 2 in the morning.
Yeah, trying to figure out how one person could contain them all.
Exactly. We're talking about a figure who was somehow both the adorable, cake-baking grandmother of a nation and at the same time a chain-smoking political operator who ordered assassinations.
And who held the fate of the Middle East in her handbag, so to speak. It's one of those biographies where if you wrote it as a novel, an editor would send it back saying, tone it down, it's not believable.
Too much. It's just too much.
We are talking, of course, about Golda Meir.
The Iron Lady.
The original Iron Lady. And, that's a crucial point. The press gave her that nickname a full decade before Margaret Thatcher even set foot in Downing Street.
So our mission for today isn't just to, recount a Wikipedia page or list off a bunch of dates. We have a specific goal with this stack of sources we've been poring over.
Right. We need to try and reconcile the two Goldas that history has left us.
Version A and version B.
Exactly. You have version A, the founding mother, the lioness of Zionism, the woman on the banknote who represents the sheer miraculous survival of the state.
And then you have version B, which I think has gotten a lot louder in recent years, the symbol of this. Ossified leadership, the woman who was asleep at the wheel in 1973.
And, of course, the politician whose views on Palestinians are still radioactive today.
So our goal is to find the aha moments. The things that explain how a carpenter's daughter from Milwaukee, of all places, ends up running a war room in Tel Aviv.
We want to understand the steel, the sarvi, and yes, the massive, massive failures. And to do that, you can't start in Israel. You can't even start in Milwaukee.
You have to go back further.
We have to go all the way back to the Russian Empire, to Kiev in 1898.
And the sources all point to this one memory that Golda herself said was the moment her life truly began. She's just a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old.
And she's not playing with dolls or running in a field.
No. She's standing in a hallway, watching her father, Moshe, taking these big planks of wood and frantically nailing them across the front door of their house.
Because there's a pogrom coming?
A mob. A mob is coming to attack Jews.
That image, it's like the rosebud of her entire life, It's the key that unlocks her whole psyche. She wrote about the rage she felt seeing her father, this big, strong man, a carpenter, reduced to complete and utter helplessness.
He couldn't fight. He could only hide.
And that feeling of never again, it didn't start with the Holocaust for her. It started right there in that hallway in Kiev. That was the foundational trauma.
It frames absolutely everything, her entire political philosophy later on.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about power or territory. It was about the absence of fear.
Yes, it was about making sure that no Jew would ever have to be the person hiding behind a boarded-up door again.
But they do get out. Her father leaves first, goes to New York, finds the unions there a bit too tough to crack, and ends up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And the rest of the family joins him in 1906. And this is the part of the story that always gets me. For the first big chunk of her life, Golda Meir wasn't really Israeli. She was an American teenager.
She was Golda Meir from Milwaukee.
And she spoke English with a perfect Midwest accent. But this was not some kind of, leave it to beaver childhood. The sources are pretty clear that by the age of 8 years old,
Unbelievable.
she is basically running her mother's grocery store on the north side of town.
Because her mother has to go to the market at 4 in the morning to buy supplies.
Right, and this is where you see the builder archetype emerge almost immediately. There's this incredible anecdote from 1908 that I think just perfectly sums up who she would become.
The textbooks.
The textbooks. She's in grade school. She sees her classmates can't afford their textbooks. Now, most kids, what do? They feel bad. Maybe they complain to the teacher.
Maybe share their book if they're nice.
Golda organizes a fundraiser.
She doesn't just organize a fundraiser. She creates a whole society. The American Young Sisters Society. I mean, even the name sounds so serious and official.
It sounds cute, but look at the logistics she pulled off. She's maybe 10 years old. She rents a hall. She mobilizes a committee of her friends. She schedules a public meeting and gets up and gives a speech to a room full of adults to raise capital.
That is terrifyingly competent. I was still trying to figure out how to tie my own shoelaces at that age.
It's a complete precursor. I mean, the exact mechanism she used to get textbooks in Milwaukee is the same one she used 40 years later to buy Spitfires and tanks for the Israeli army.
She understood it instinctively.
She got it early on. If you want to change reality, you don't pray, you don't ask for permission, you organize, you pool your resources. and you act.
But that knack for organizing,
Yeah.
it didn't seem to extend to her own family life, which sounds incredibly stifling.
Oh, very much so. Her mother, Bloom, was very traditional. The plan was simple. You finish a little bit of school, you find a good husband, you learn to bake bread, and that's your life. That was the ceiling of ambition her mother had for her.
And Golda was having none of it.
Not a chance. She rebels hard. She runs away from home. She gets on a train and goes to Denver to live with her older sister, Shayna.
And we really need to double-click on this Denver period. The sources frame this as her real university. She didn't go to some Ivy League school. She went to Shayna's living room.
The intellectual evenings. It was basically a salon in the classic European sense.
Right. You had anarchists, socialists, Zionists, trade unionists.
All chain smoking and drinking tea and arguing about the fate of the world until sunrise. And this is where Golda gets radicalized, in the best sense of that word. She moves from a sort of vague cultural Jewish identity to a hard-edged, very specific political ideology.
Socialist Zionism.
Exactly. And we should probably define that because those words get thrown around a lot. What did socialist Zionism actually mean to a teenager in Denver in, say, 1913?
It wasn't just about having a country, right?
No, it was so much more than that. It meant that the return of the Jewish people to their homeland had to be a revolution of labor. They wanted to create a new kind of Jew. A Jew who was strong, who worked the land, who lived in these communes, these kibbutzim, sharing everything.
A rejection of the old stereotypes.
A total rejection of the merchant or intellectual stereotype. It was about becoming a worker. It wasn't just about building a country. It was about building a utopia.
And somewhere in the middle of all this high-minded debate, amidst all the tea and the cigarette smoke, she meets a guy.
Morris Meyerson, the sign painter.
Who sounds like he was her complete opposite. The sources describe him as gentle, quiet. He loved poetry. He loved music. He just wanted a peaceful evening at home.
And she's this tornado of political activity.
But they fall in love. They do. But even in romance, Golda's a negotiator. When they decide to get married in 1917, back in Milwaukee, she hits him with an ultimatum, a literal precondition for the marriage certificate.
She says, I will marry you, but on one condition, we are moving to Palestine.
Which is such a heavy ask.
Yeah.
Hey, honey, let's leave, modern America with its plumbing and its electricity and move to a malaria-infested backwater of the crumbling Ottoman Empire.
And Morris, bless his heart, he agrees. Maybe he thought she'd grow out of it, or maybe he was just that much in love. I don't know. But they arrive in 1921 on a ship called the SS Pocahontas.
And the reality check must have been brutal.
Oh, immediate. They apply to join a kibbutz. Kibbutz Moravia.
And they get rejected.
They get rejected. The kibbutz members looked at this American girl with her nice clothes and she actually brought an electric iron with her.
Oh, that's amazing.
And they just assumed she was a princess. They thought, she won't last a week in the fields. She'll break a nail and run back to Milwaukee.
So she has to prove them wrong. The sources describe her work: picking almonds, planting trees, and eventually taking over the chicken coops.
And apparently she was fanatical about it. She wanted to be the perfect worker. She wanted to prove she could suffer and toil just as much as anyone born there. It was a point of pride.
But the kibbutz saw the same thing we saw in that Milwaukee story. They saw a leader.
Exactly. They realized, okay, she's a hard worker, but her real talents are being wasted on chickens. This woman is an incredible organizer. She's a brilliant talker. So they pull her out of the fields.
And they send her as their representative to the Histadrut, the General Federation of Labor.
And that's the beginning of her political career.
But what about poor Morris?
Morris just couldn't adapt. He hated the physical labor. He hated the communal living with its total lack of privacy. He got sick. He was deeply unhappy. And this becomes a really tragic thread in her life.
Her rise to power.
It basically comes at the direct cost of her marriage. They separated years later, though they never actually divorced. She chose the cause over the home every single time.
Which brings us to the pivotal year, 1948. The State of Israel is about to be declared. The British are pulling out. 5 Arab armies are warming up their tanks on the borders. And the Jewish leadership has a massive, massive problem.
They're broke.
Utterly broke.
They have people willing to fight, but they have no heavy weapons, no planes, no tanks. The treasurer of the Jewish agency, a man named Eliezer Kaplan, does the math. He figures they need about $7 to $8 million just to survive the first few weeks.
And he doesn't think he can get it.
He thinks maybe he can scrape that together from American donors. But the mood in the U.S. was donor fatigue. They'd been giving for years.
And this is when Golda steps in and says, let me go.
And Kaplan, the treasurer, actually tried to stop her. He said, the Americans are tired of giving. You won't get a dime. Don't waste the money on a plane ticket. She went anyway.
And she didn't just go to New York. She crisscrossed the country.
And she didn't have a PowerPoint presentation or a slick video. She just stood up there with no notes, this intense woman from Milwaukee, and she just told these crowds of American Jews the truth.
What did she say?
She basically said, we are going to fight. If we have guns, we'll fight with guns. If not, we'll fight with stones. But you have to decide if we are going to live or die. If we die, the dream dies with us.
And the money just starts pouring in.
Raining down. She raised over $50 million.
In 1948 dollars.
In 1948 dollars. Adjusted for inflation, you're talking about hundreds of millions, maybe $1 billion in terms of purchasing power for a tiny brand new state. It completely changed the trajectory of the war.
Ben-Gurion's famous quote.
David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister, said, someday when history is written, it will be said that there was a Jewish woman who got the money which made the state possible.
It funded a third of the entire war effort.
Incredible. She literally bought the weapons that saved the country.
So she funded the war. But she also tried to stop it, or at least, manage the odds through some incredibly risky personal diplomacy.
This is the spy thriller part of her story.
It really is. It's May 1948, just days before independence is declared. She needs to know one thing for certain. Is King Abdullah I of Jordan going to join the other Arab armies and invade?
So what does she do? She disguises herself as an Arab woman.
I still can't get over this image. Golda Meir in full traditional Arab dress, getting in a car, crossing enemy lines, and driving to Amman for a secret meeting with a king.
The danger is immense. If she's caught, she's not just a prisoner of war. She's a spy. She's dead.
So she gets to the meeting, and it's this fascinating clash of worlds. She reminds Abdullah that he had promised in a previous secret meeting not to attack.
And Abdullah gives this very poetic and very sad answer. He says, when I made that promise, I was alone. Now I am one of 5. Meaning the other Arab leaders. He said the pressure was just too great.
And he asks her to wait. He says, why are you in such a hurry to declare independence?
And her response is just legendary. It's pure Golda. She looks at him and says, we've been waiting for 2,000 years. Is that being in a hurry?
The steel.
Yeah.
Just pure steel.
Right. And she walked away from that meeting knowing that war was unavoidable. She failed to stop it, but she succeeded in confirming the intelligence. She came back and told Ben-Gurion, prepare for the absolute worst.
So the war happens. Israel survives, against all odds. Golda signs the Declaration of Independence. She's one of only 2 women to do so.
Right.
And then her reward for all this is not a cabinet post in Tel Aviv.
No, she gets shipped off to Moscow.
Which she hated, apparently. She felt like she was being exiled from the main event.
She was appointed minister plenipotentiary to the Soviet Union, and this posting leads to what's known as the Rosh Hashanah incident, which is one of the most emotional moments in modern Jewish history.
You really have to understand the context here. This is Stalin's Soviet Union. The Iron Curtain is down. Soviet Jews are terrified. Their culture is being systematically crushed. Hebrew is banned. Zionism is a capital crime.
So Golda decides to go to the Moscow Choral Synagogue for the New Year services. She probably expected to find a few old men praying quietly in the shadows.
But when she arrives, the street is packed.
Completely packed. Estimates say up to 50,000 people showed up. They are risking their jobs, their freedom, maybe their lives, just to be there. And when they see her, the living, breathing representative of this new Jewish state, they just erupt.
And they're chanting.
They're chanting Nasha Golda, which is Russian for our Golda.
That must have been an absolutely electrifying moment.
It terrified the Soviet authorities. It was this spontaneous proof that despite decades of brutal suppression, Jewish identity was still alive and kicking. For Golda, it was a profound validation of everything she believed in.
That the state wasn't just for the people living there?
No, it was a beacon. It was a source of pride and hope for Jews trapped everywhere. She wrote later that she felt like she was dissolving into the crowd, that the boundary between her and them had just vanished.
She eventually comes back to Israel and gets the job she always wanted. She enters what she later called her 7 beautiful years.
She becomes the Minister of Labor in 1949.
And this is where the revolutionary ideals meet the brutal reality of governing. It's one thing to talk about building a socialist utopia in a Denver living room.
It's another thing entirely when you're the Minister of Labor in 1950. Israel's population is doubling, then tripling. Immigrants are pouring in from the displaced persons camps in Europe. Holocaust survivors, and then huge waves from Arab countries, Iraq, Yemen, Morocco.
And they arrived with nothing. No money, no Hebrew, and literally nowhere to sleep.
This is the era of the Ma'abaro, the transit camps.
We're talking about tent cities.
Tent cities, tin huts, mud in the winter, baking heat in the summer, disease, unemployment, despair. And Golda is the person responsible for fixing this nightmare.
And she was ruthless about it, about the construction.
Absolutely ruthless. She oversaw the construction of 200,000 apartments. Now, were they pretty? No. They were these brutalist concrete blocks, these shikunim. But she got people out of the tents and into homes with a roof and a door.
She was also building the welfare state, Social Security, maternity leave, healthcare infrastructure.
This goes back to the core contradiction we talked about at the start. If Golda had retired in, say, 1965, she would be remembered almost universally as the great builder, the social architect.
A mother of the welfare state.
Exactly. She was literally constructing brick by brick the country she had dreamed of all those years ago.
Then comes the foreign ministry in 1956. And this is where she stops being Golda Meir
and becomes Golda Meir.
Why the name change?
It was Ben-Gurion's policy. He insisted that all foreign service members, all diplomats representing Israel abroad, have Hebrew names. So Meyerson, her married name, became Meir.
Which means illuminate or burn brightly.
Pretty fitting, I'd say.
And her time as foreign minister is interesting. She seems to have focused very heavily on Africa. What was the thinking there?
Well, she saw a kind of shared experience. Israel was a young nation that had thrown off British colonial rule. These newly independent African nations were throwing off British, French, Belgian colonial rule.
So there was a sense of solidarity.
A sense of solidarity, absolutely. She believed Israel could be a model, that they could teach these new countries how to build a nation from scratch. You know, irrigation techniques, agricultural co-ops, public health clinics.
It was soft power, but also something more.
I think so. The sources suggest she was genuinely invested in this idea of an alliance of young post-colonial nations. And she traveled extensively, building relationships and alliances that actually lasted for decades.
Okay, so she does all that. Then she retires in 1966. She's tired.
Yeah.
And we now know she's sick. She has lymphoma, though she keeps it a complete secret from the public.
She thinks she's done.
And then, in 1969, Prime Minister Levi Eshkol dies suddenly of heart attack. The Labour Party is in chaos, and they need a unifying figure, a stabilizing hand to hold the coalition together.
And they look around the room, and there's Golda, the grandmother of the nation. She's 71 years old.
Then she becomes the prime minister.
The accidental prime minister. And, you know, initially, she is wildly popular. She leads the party to its best ever election result. She's this tough but motherly figure. But this is where the conception begins to take hold, and it's where her legacy gets really, really complicated.
Let's talk about that, because her time as prime minister is really defined by two massive blind spots. Her blindness to the Palestinian issue and her blindness to the war drums beating in 1973.
They're connected in a way. They both stem from a kind of intellectual rigidity, a certainty that her view of the world was the only correct one.
Let's start with the Palestinians. There's a quote from a 1969 interview with the Sunday Times that has haunted her legacy ever since.
Oh, it's the "they did not exist" quote. It's probably the single most famous or infamous thing she ever said.
The interviewer asked her about the rise of the Palestinian Fedayeen, the fighters, and Golda said, quote, "There was no such thing as Palestinians. It was not as though there was a Palestinian people in Palestine considering itself as a Palestinian people, and we came and threw them out and took their country from them. They did not exist."
Hearing that today, I mean, it's just shocking. It sounds like a complete denial of reality.
And the sources are clear. This wasn't just a slip of the tongue. This was her deeply held worldview.
It was. She was an old-school, dyed-in-the-wool Zionist who saw the conflict in very simple terms. It was Jews versus Arabs. She did not recognize a distinct, separate Palestinian national identity. To her, they were just southern Syrians or Jordanians who happened to live in the area.
And that blindness had consequences.
Massive consequences. It meant she completely underestimated the rise of Palestinian nationalism and the power of the PLO. She thought she could just manage the status quo in the occupied territories forever, that it was a problem that could be contained, not one that had to be solved politically.
That same rigidity, that I know I'm right attitude, it served her well when she was fundraising, but it's incredibly dangerous when you're conducting diplomacy.
And you see again in 1972 with the Munich Olympics massacre.
Right. The Black September attack. 11 Israeli athletes and coaches murdered on global television.
Golda appealed to the world to save our citizens, and when the international response was, in her view, weak and ineffective, she didn't hesitate. She authorized the Mossad to hunt down and assassinate every single person believed to be responsible.
Operation Wrath of God.
It showed her ruthless streak. When it came to protecting Israelis, there was no line she wouldn't cross. But that ruthlessness, or maybe that overconfidence, it eventually backfired spectacularly.
Which brings us to the tragedy. October 1973, the Yom Kippur War.
This is the fall. And to understand what happened, you have to understand the Israeli mindset at the time. You have to understand what they called the conception, or in Hebrew, hakonsepsia.
Walk us through that. What was the conception?
In a nutshell, it was supreme overconfidence. After Israel's stunning six-day victory in the 1967 war, the Israeli military and intelligence community convinced themselves of a very specific narrative.
Which was?
That the Arabs knew they couldn't possibly win a conventional war against Israel, and therefore they wouldn't even try. Specifically, the conception was that Egypt would not attack until it had an air force capable of striking deep into Israel, which was years away.
So any evidence to the contrary was just dismissed.
It was filtered through this lens of arrogance. Golda was actually getting raw intelligence reports in the weeks leading up to the war. Hey, the Syrians are massing hundreds of tanks on the Golan Heights. The Egyptians are moving massive amounts of equipment to the Suez Canal.
And she was worried. The sources say she had a gut feeling that something was wrong.
She was. On October 5th, the day before the war broke out, she called in her military advisors. Her defense minister, the legendary Mossad, was there, and she asked them point blank, "Are you sure we're safe?"
And they basically patted her on the head.
They told her, "Don't worry, Golda, it's just maneuvers. The Arabs are too weak to attack. Don't panic." They were prisoners of their own conception.
Until 4 o'clock in the morning on October 6th, Yom Kippur.
The holiest day of the Jewish year, the country is shut down, people are in synagogue, and the phone rings in Golda's residence. It's her military secretary. And he says, "It's not maneuvers. War is starting today, probably at sunset."
So now she has a decision to make. And this is probably the most debated, most agonizing moment in Israeli military history.
Her chief of staff, David Elazar, wants to launch an immediate preemptive strike, hit the Egyptian and Syrian air forces on the ground, just like they did in '67, annihilate them before they can even get off the ground.
And Golda says no.
Golda says no, and the question is why? Why would the Iron Lady refuse to strike first when she knows an attack is imminent?
It all came down to one person, Henry Kissinger.
Exactly. She was playing three-dimensional chess. She knew the world had changed since 1967. Israel was much more diplomatically isolated. And more importantly, she knew they would eventually need a massive American airlift of weapons and supplies to win a prolonged war.
And Kissinger had made it crystal clear.
He had basically told them, if you guys strike first, if you are seen as the aggressor, don't even bother calling us. The line he supposedly used was, "You wouldn't get so much as a nail."
So Golda Meir, the tough, uncompromising Iron Lady, made the conscious decision to let her country get hit first.
To absorb the first blow. It is a chilling, almost unbearable calculus. To know the bombs are coming and to wait for them, all to secure your diplomatic and military lifeline.
And that decision, as you said, both saved the country and nearly destroyed it.
Absolutely. By waiting, they allowed the Egyptians and Syrians to make huge gains in the first 48 hours. Thousands of Israeli soldiers were killed or captured. The Golan Heights were almost completely overrun.
There were moments in that war room where Dion, the hero of '67, was reportedly talking about the fall of the Third Temple.
He thought it was the end. He was having a nervous breakdown.
And Golda.
Golda was reportedly devastated. There were rumors she contemplated suicide in those first few days. But, and this is the critical part, she held it together in public. While her famous generals were panicking, she was the one on the phone to Nixon and Kissinger.
Using the fact that they hadn't struck first as leverage.
Total leverage. She basically said, "We did what you asked. We took the hit. Now where is our stuff?" And it worked. Operation Nickel Grass, those giant American C-5 Galaxy transport planes started landing every 15 minutes, packed with tanks and ammunition. And that's what turned the tide of the war.
So militarily, her gamble paid off. Israel pushed back, crossed the Suez, and won the war. But politically,
Politically, she was a dead woman walking. The public could not forgive the surprise. They couldn't forgive the arrogance, the lack of preparedness. They looked at the 2,600 fresh graves and they asked, "Where were you? Why didn't you see this coming?"
even though the official commission of inquiry, the Agronaut Commission,
It technically cleared her. It placed the blame squarely on the military intelligence chiefs. The report actually praised her decision-making on that fateful morning.
But the public didn't care about technicalities.
No, the trust was shattered. The myth of competence was broken. She resigned in April of 1974. She gave a speech where she just said, "It is beyond my strength to continue carrying this burden."
And she died just 4 years later. The lymphoma she had kept secret for so long finally caught up with her.
A tragic end to a titanic life.
Before we wrap up, I do want to touch on some of the more personal stuff, because the Golda brand was such a huge part of her political power. The shoes, for instance.
Gold shoes. It's amazing. They became actual Israeli army slang for those ugly, sturdy, orthopedic lace-up shoes that they issued to female soldiers.
Because she just did not care about fashion at all.
Not in the slightest. She projected this image of austere, grandmotherly simplicity. She was famous for holding cabinet meetings in her kitchen while serving cakes she'd baked herself. The kitchen cabinet wasn't a metaphor, it was a literal place.
But there's a detail in the sources about where she lived that I found really, really unsettling. The story of the Villa Harun al-Rashid.
Ah, yes. This is the detail that, for me, just perfectly captures the unresolved tension of her life and of the state itself. In the 1960s, as foreign minister, she lived in this beautiful stone house in Jerusalem.
But it wasn't a house built by Jews.
No, it was built in 1926 by a prominent Christian Arab family, the Bisharats, who fled during the 1948 war. And the villa had its name, Villa Harun al-Rashid, written in beautiful Arabic ceramic tiles on the front.
And the sources say Golda had the tiles sandblasted off the wall.
She had the Arabic script removed, erased. She lived in the house, but she erased its history. It's such a powerful and painful metaphor for that entire generation's attitude.
It connects right back to the "they did not exist" quote.
It's the same impulse, this desire to build a new future so intensely that it required actively unseeing the past, unseeing the people who were there before you. It's a willful blindness that existed right alongside her incredible creative nation-building energy.
And what about her relationship with religion? She was famously an atheist.
A staunchly secular, cultural Zionist, she had that classic line, which is just the perfect politician's answer. When asked about her faith, she said, "I believe in the Jewish people, and the Jewish people believe in God."
It's brilliant. It sidesteps the question completely.
But it also reflects her generation of labor Zionists. They weren't religious, they were socialists. But they were absolutely 100% committed to the history and the survival of the Jewish people.
So bringing this all together, it is just so complicated. You have the woman who raised $50 million to prevent a second Holocaust, who built housing for hundreds of thousands of immigrants, who shattered the glass ceiling for women in global politics.
And you have the woman who erased the tiles from the front of her house and who missed the most obvious warning signs of a catastrophic war.
It leaves us with a really provocative question, I think.
Which is?
Are the skills required to build a nation fundamentally different from the skills required to lead one in a time of crisis?
Say more about that.
Well, Golda had the skills of a builder in spades. She was stubborn, she was single-minded, she had this absolute moral certainty. And you need that when you're draining swamps or fighting an independence war against impossible odds. You need to see the world in black and white.
But when you're a prime minister trying to navigate a complex diplomatic landscape, when you need to read the subtle signals coming from Anwar Sadat in Egypt or understand the nuances of an emerging Palestinian identity.
That black and white vision makes you blind.
Exactly. The very stubbornness that made her a hero in 1948 helped make her a failure in 1973. She was the Iron Lady, but iron doesn't bend. And in politics, if you can't bend, eventually, you break.
A heck of a place to land. Golda Meir, the builder who couldn't renovate her own worldview.
A fascinating, flawed, and unforgettable giant.
Thank you all for listening to this deep dive. If you enjoyed it, pass it on to someone who might. There is always more to uncover.
Stay curious.
We'll catch you on the next one.